it's Annette and welcome back to Cotto Verde. Today I'm going to be taking some cuttings from plants that might not make it through the winter. It's July and it's quite a good time to take cuttings because plants are in their peak growing stage and so they'll root more readily, and also it's lovely warm weather. But also, if you take cuttings at this time, they've got time to develop roots before they hit the cold spells of winter. And the kind of plants that you want to take cuttings from would be plants that might not necessarily make it through the winter. So something that could be, semi-hardy, and that would be something like maybe a Penstemon. They don't always make it through harsh winters, and something like lavender that won't always make it through a hard winter. But it's also good to take cuttings if you want to make more plants for free, and that's primarily the reason why I do it. I don't tend to have trouble with my lavender and my Penstemons, but I know that a lot of people do, especially if they're further north than me. But if you want to make more plants for free, then this is the way to do it. So I thought I'd mention what you'll need to take your cuttings, and that's really not very much. So you'll need a pair of secateurs, or I like to use snips, because we're taking cuttings of things that have very small stems, and it's nice to be able to get in where you need them. So I use something with a very pointy end, like a snip. And the other thing you'll need is like a plastic bag, so that as you're collecting, just use a plastic bag, any plastic bag will do. And so as you're collecting your cuttings, you put them in a plastic bag and then close up the top, and that sort of keeps the moisture in and stops them going limp, and just helps keep them going whilst you're taking your cuttings before you get them into the pot. But what I also like to do, I haven't seen very many people do it, but I tend to just bring out like a little vase with me and put my cuttings in there, and then they can just drink up some water whilst I'm wandering around. I find it easier than fiddling around with a plastic bag, but it's entirely up to you what you choose to do, whether you bring a little vase or a little jug. Anyway, that's what I use. So today I'm going to take cuttings of Penstemon and my lavender hidcote, but just for fun I'm also going to take cuttings of some Clematis that I have, and it's a group 1 Clematis, so it flowers in the spring, and I've found some shoots that don't have any flowers on them, so that's cool, or seed heads. And I'm also going to take cuttings from my Rosemary and from a Pittosporum that I absolutely love, and I'm going to try those. And I'm also going to take a cutting from Brachyglotis, and I did try this last year and then I failed, so I want to try and take a cutting again and see whether this year I have more success. Kind of taking my life in my hands with the lavender because it's covered in bees. So I don't want to get stung and I don't want to upset the bees, but I do want some cuttings. This hasn't flowered yet, and I've actually cut into the woody stem a bit, which is absolutely fine, but that is a good length for me. I shall use that. And then I'm just going to pop it in my plastic bag whilst I take some more. So then what I do is I just take my cuttings and put them in my little vase of water so they have a drink whilst I go around. So for the lavender and the rosemary, I do sort of 50-50 grit and compost, so it's a very gritty compost. And then for all the others, I'm just going to make sure there is some grit in the compost. And if you want to, you can use perlite, that works as well. So this isn't quite as gritty, this is not 50-50 anymore, but it's going to help with drainage, just make sure nothing rots. So I'm just going to fill these up for the other ones. So I'm now ready to pot up my cuttings, and I'm going to show you how I do that. And what I've got is a blade to make a sharp cut, and I've got some dibbers, a variety of dibbers, but you can use anything, use a pencil or a chopstick or something like that. And I've got some rooting powder, and I've got a flat surface to make a cut on, but use anything. You can use a chopping board or just a piece of wood, just something so that you can make a good cut. And I've got my snips if I need them. And yeah, let's get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is my lavender. All you have to do is take off the lower leaves, so clean up the stem like that. So where you've got a clean stem, you want to make sure that it's pliable. So this is like a semi-ripe cutting actually, because I've got quite a stiff bit of stem there, and I am just going to make a cut right below where I can see there was a leaf joint. So you don't want to have the little leafy bits, and I'm going to make a cut right below that on the green bit. I don't particularly want to use the brown bit, so I'm making a cut right there. And in fact I'm going to take off one or two more leaves, because I want quite a lot of this stem to go into the pot. So all you want to do when you've got your cutting prepared, with the lavender I'm using grittier compost, and you just make a hole and then push your cutting in right up against the edge up until where the leaves join the stem, your lowest set of leaves, and it's as simple as that. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing with these here. So the reason that you take off the extra leaves that you don't want is because they are going to transpire, which means that they're going to lose a lot of water, and so the fewer leaves that you have left on your stem, the less likely it is that your cutting is going to struggle to keep water. And dib another hole. So all I'm then going to do with this pot is water it in and put it in a propagator, and I'll show you that in a minute, but first I'm going to do the other cuttings. You can actually root rosemary cuttings by leaving them in a jug of water and just changing it every day or every other day for a few weeks, and then you'll see roots form. So you can just put them in a vase or something like that. But I tend to like doing this because then I don't have to worry too much. I can just, you know, stick it in and hope for the best. So make sure you're always cutting below some leaves, and then strip it off, or cut it off with your knife. So that you're only left with a little bit of foliage. So the reason I'm dunking these again is because these are much firmer at the base, and I feel like they need a bit of rooting hormone. And the reason that you put them around the edge is twofold. Firstly, it's because it's slightly warmer around the edge, the sun will get to it, and also because then it's not sitting in water in case, you know, you make your compost too damp. You don't want them to be drowning. So with the Penstemons, so I'm going to cut it off just below there, and then I'm going to take the leaves off very carefully like this. So I'm left with something that looks like that, and then if you are worried about it transpiring too much, you can chop the leaves in half, and then you can just push it in, and then just chop the leaves off. And if you want to, you can use the rooting powder in exactly the same way. So because I've taken cuttings from two different Penstemon plants, I'm going to label them, and I know that this one with the darker stem was sour grapes and the other one was mother of pearl. So I'm just going to write some labels and put those in, but with the lavender and rosemary, in all honesty, I don't bother because I know what they look like, I know what they are. So the other thing that I've collected today is this lovely Clematis. And I've had it in water, and I'm going to treat it in exactly the same way that I treated the other cuttings, except with this one. So I'm going to cut it below the leaves there and take these off. And then because it's very long, and oh, actually I picked one that has a flower, so let's see whether this one takes. I'm just going to take that off there, and then I'm going to, this has got exactly the same mix in it, and I'm going to use the rooting hormone. And then plonk it in there, like that. So I'm going to chop it off below the leaf there. And take those off. And then I'm going to take out the growing tip. And then I'm going to try and take a cutting from this piece as well, which is the bottom. We'll see if this works. And then I also did a little cheeky move and took some cuttings from some Veronicastrum. This is the Alba version, so it's white, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and root these as well. And I haven't done Veronicastrum before, so let's see. I mean, I think with Veronicastrum what you would normally do is chop the root ball in half if you want to propagate it. So I'm going to do the Pittosporum, and the Pittosporum are semi-ripe cuttings, and what we mean by that is that the top of the cutting is very flexible, but the base of the cutting is firm. And the way that you do that is slightly differently because you need to just expose a bit of the stem. So you can already see the condensation forming inside my propagator, and it literally is just one of these propagators that you use for seedlings and stuff like that, but you could just as easily get a plastic bag and put it over your pot and then sort of trap it with some string or some elastic band or something, but do make sure you put like some chopsticks or something inside to keep the plastic bag off the plant's leaves, because you don't want the plastic bag touching the leaves. And the same with the propagator, actually. You don't want the leaves really touching the side because then they'll get damp and go mouldy. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it in here. Definitely keep the vents shut until I can see that they're happy and settled in. If I ever feel it's getting too moist in there, obviously I can just open the vents, but you sort of have to judge it a little bit by ear. It's really not as difficult as it sounds. Judge it by eye rather than ear, actually. And I will definitely keep you updated on my Instagram account, so do follow me on there if you want to see what's going on with these cuttings that I've taken today. So I'm going to keep the cuttings here in my kitchen because it's nice and warm and they'll be out of direct sunlight, and also that way I can check them every day and I won't forget about them. And I think that may be one of the problems I had last year with the Brachyglotis. I just I forgot to check on it and it didn't do particularly well. So, but I've had great success doing all my other cuttings this way. In about 4 to 6 weeks, they should start or should have rooted. If they haven't rooted in that time, you're probably not going to have any success. I mean, you can keep trying and just leave them, but it depends what the foliage is looking like. If it's looking ropey, then that probably wasn't successful. But in 4 to 6 weeks, if you give a slight tug on each cutting, then you should feel some resistance, and that way that you know that it's formed some roots. You could always tip them out of the pot, but I wouldn't advise that until you're pretty sure that there are roots. You might see roots coming out of the bottom of the pot, and that's another way to know that they've rooted well. Or you may see that there's new foliage growing, and if that's the case, they probably have rooted. And then at that point in time, we'll pot them on, and I'll show you how we do that in a future video. So subscribe to my channel if you want to see how that's happening, but do follow me on Instagram, because I will be posting on there and keeping everyone updated on a regular basis with how my cuttings are doing. So if you've got any questions or you'd like to make a comment, then leave them in the comments below. I always check to see what people are saying, and it's really nice to say hi to people who've watched my videos. So yeah, do use the comments at the bottom of this video if you want to. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. I'm going to tweet, I should tell you that it's not always successful. It's not always successful.